My name is Pankaj Mishra. Rifleman Javaid Ahmed Wani. He is 25 years old. He hails from Jammu and Kashmir and he is employed with Jammu Kashmir Light Infantry. He has gone missing from Kulgam district since Saturday evening, and Javaid had come home on leave around Eid. Security forces have launched a massive hunt to track down the missing soldier. His car was found abandoned at Paranhall. Eyewitnesses have claimed that there were blood marks in the car. However, officials are yet to confirm it. Kashmir police have registered a case and arrested some suspects. Raids are being conducted across Kulgam district and adjoining areas. Army spokesperson has said that the army is collecting details about the incident. Meanwhile, the family has made a tearful appeal to Javaid's alleged abductors to release him alive, since he was the only breadwinner of the family. The father also made an emotional appeal that if the abductors wanted, he would ask his son to quit the job in army as well. We would be discussing it threadbare with my colleagues Kabir and Varghese, but before that, let's listen in to some reactions of the family that has come in.
Temis traitan zindagi ala. To agar tem kansi sakti as vatna bus tat maafi mangan. या अगर दबे नौकरी त्राना नौकरी ते सुनाज उस तम कुसमुक लड़क कह तमें ओतर पे 2 पॉइंट खून हस्पतालस मज सुनाज उस तम कुसमुक लड़क कह नोस तमिस कंस अदाव नोस तमिस कह गामस मज तमिस असल पे सारे से वथन बेहवन तो रात गो सह शामनस बग माज अन तमिस सुबह ड्यूटी गन तो बस वन दोपनस मे दिज बान माज तो सुबह त्रज मे होते एयरपोर्ट मकसद सह कोर पे फोन दोक ये गाड़ यल तथ दार दरवाज यल पे वत अत कह बेहद दार खून लड़ित बहुत मेहरबानी कर अपील कर तिम यमिस नश तम त्रन तमिस सेहत सलामत यल बहुत अपील कर बस युत गुजार कमाई कुल सो योर सलामत त्रमित चढ़ित कमाई कुल सो
उसको 1 महीना हो गया घर पे, तो उसको आज 6 बजे वापस जाना है ड्यूटी। तो कल शाम को 8 बजे से गैब हो गए, पता नहीं किसने उसको उठाकर ले गया। हमारी गुजारिश यही है, अगर किसी के पास है तो मेहरबानी करके उसको छोड़ो, मेहरबानी करके।
Kabir, 25-year-old Javaid, obviously not the first case, I would say, in Jammu and Kashmir to happen, especially from the Indian Armed Forces. Do you see a pattern here that why specifically these youngsters being targeted, if at all? I mean, I hope all is well with Javaid.
Well, I mean, that's the hope that we all should have at this point in time. It's actually quite surreal. I mean, the larger message that must be going out to the people outside. You've got a Jawan, an army personnel who's just 25 years old. It's quite a young age, and the blood stains that were witnessed in the car, the pair of slippers that were left behind, it only goes on to show that there's violence involved here for sure. The pattern that you're talking about, and of course we'll play those graphics out as well, because the age is a pattern to look at. Their designation being the riflemen is a pattern that one can look at, and their religion, the community that they hail from.
The Jammu Kashmir Light Infantry also.
This particular regiment that they're targeting. So it is targeted killing. I mean, of course, we're jumping the gun here. We still don't know if Javaid is alive or not. Let's hope that he is alive, and of course, that's what the parents must be feeling like. I mean, you heard the cries of the parents over there.
Right.
He's the sole bread earner in the family. He's now gone missing. He was at home for the last 1 month. It's only just a day before he was about to go back for his duty is when this particular ordeal took place. 9 kilometers away from his own village, he steps out to buy groceries, run his errands, and doesn't make it back home. The larger message that I'm talking about, Pankaj, is that this is a security personnel. The job of this person is to protect the boundaries, the peripheries, lives. Protection is this person's main job, and his own protection has been sabotaged, and that many people will, you know, come out and say that whether this is Kashmir, whether killings have gone down, killings have gone up, abrogation of Article 370, look at the economy that's booming now, it's oozing, and of course communal politics always has been at play in Jammu and Kashmir. But keeping all of that aside, the problem that we're looking at is quite serious. You've got your army Jawan, our own Jawan, youngsters. What will they think about being an army personnel? You've got the father who's saying, please send him back home. I will ask him to quit his job. I will force him to quit his job.
Varghese, the terrorists are known, and why I say terrorists because, you know, given Jammu and Kashmir, given a very specific, as Kabir mentions, a target, especially from army, young, and that to a rifleman in Jammu Kashmir Light Infantry, which is considered to be one of the premier regiments to serve Jammu and Kashmir. Since the abrogation of Article 370, do you believe that things have changed a bit, or off and on these messaging acts that is being done by the terrorists, that they would target the sole breadwinner, the family? Do you believe that after the abrogation certain things should have changed or have changed actually on the ground?
Well, if you look at if you're looking at abrogation of that article and whether the ground situation has changed, well, to a large extent it has changed. But at the same time, it is also desperate attempts by these organizations that are trying to, you know, change the narrative of the youth from that region joining the armed forces. Now, why is Javaid the problem? Or let me take you to 2018. Why was Aurangzeb a problem? The problem was that they were holding the tricolor. They were in. They were the people who were part of the JKLI, as you said, it's a premier unit of the armed forces. And then these are the people who are from the valley, getting integrated into the integrating mechanisms of the country. They are becoming more Indian. And that goes against the very narrative that some forces across the border want to push, and some terrorist organizations sitting cosily across the border want to push. What they want to push? They want to push and say that the youth of that particular region are not happy with the government. That's why there is an armed rebellion. And the people like Javaid and people like Aurangzeb went against the grain of that thought. Right. So since they're going against the grain of the thought, they become targets as such. Aurangzeb also had a similar profile. He was young, he was a rifleman, he was part of JKLI, and we know that he was
It's a classic case of how, you know, targeted killings and how they've happened in the valley from Poonch to, well, Baramulla. I'm trying to say, people were saying that, you know, you've got laborers from Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh that are being targeted.
There was a trend of that also.
These are Hindus that are being targeted by the hands of Muslim terrorists. But nobody is spared in Kashmir, it seems.
And nobody is spared in Kashmir.
See,
I agree with
look at the data. March 2022, Lashkar-e-Taiba abducts and kills Army soldier Samir Ahmed Mullah. September 2021,
Mullah was found in Orchard later on.
In an orchard. Then in Kulgam, another body was found. 2020, also Rifleman Shakir Manzoor Wage goes missing and body found 1 year later. Kabir, obviously looking at these patterns, obviously it's not a one-off incident, and the trend, the general perception of the public in Kashmir after abrogation of Article 370 goes, obviously these sort of acts are denting it, and maybe they are actually meant to do that. How best do you think the government can reply to it?
Well, the government has to start doing confidence building measures. I mean, Manipur is such a huge example in front of us. These socio-economic fault lines, if you let them be, let them exist, if you don't work on it, keep pushing them under the rug, then it'll, you know, blast on you one or the other day. People are talking about how the G20 and the event that took place in Srinagar was a huge success. People started talking about how, you know, all the delegations that came about, they took their ride in the shikaras. But शिकारा के पीछे जिनका शिकार हो रहा है उनके बारे में भी सोचा जाए. And I'm not, you know, pointing fingers at the dispensation over there. I'm sure the governor, the home minister, and the state, you know, machinery are trying their best. Like we already learned, it's a multi-agency combing operation that's going on. You know, there are sniffer dogs on the road. It's not just the army. You've got the local administration. You've got the Jammu and Kashmir police. You've got the army personnel. I mean, of course, the regiment itself is going to leave no stone unturned. It's quite sentimental value. It's emotional. I mean, if we're all from the same regiment, we'd be willing to die for each other. That's the way these regiments work. And you know, the visuals that are also coming across from the agencies. I was in the newsroom and people were discussing about you know, how ये ढूंढ थोड़े रहे हैं, ये थोड़े ढूंढ रहे हैं, ये तो ये देखो, these guys are just walking. It's just normal patrolling, normal flag march.
General perception is that
but we don't get to see what's really happening on the ground. They must be traversing through the thick forest. They must be traversing through treacherous terrains.
When an incident like this happened, because what you saw footage might be very misleading of what is actually happening.
Exactly.
It's only peripheral security work that's happening. I was telling you like how when that footage came, and I was talking about that this doesn't represent anything. You're talking about a huge network being activated. You have your human intelligence networks that are there that would be activated to trace them out. You are talking about the army's network being used to trace them out. So there is going to be a lot of behind the scenes activity that has been happening.
Yes, which is kept away from the public eyes, obviously.
What they see normally is few soldiers with their Kalashnikovs walking in doing their security duties, but that doesn't mean that is the kind of search that we are looking at.
Right, and just the fact that the guy came home for Eid, and this kind of targeted abduction so far, we're still looking at a possible abduction. That's the only thing we know for sure. We don't know if he's dead or not, and God forbid something like that happens. But he came back from Eid. It's horrible to even look at those gut-wrenching thoughts and opinions of the father and the mother.
I mean, these terrorists have always made this a point that the impact, be it emotional or strategic, they want to make it palpable. And looking at the family members and the neighbors who are, walking down the street in solidarity, asking for him to be released, and a quick search operation should also happen. This obviously, in a way, emboldens these terror elements.
That is their job.
Idea is to scare the society.
Exactly.
Which is nothing new, Pankaj and Varghese.
And this has been going on for a long time.
So
coming
back to your first question, where you were saying how the government can reply, what can the security personnel do? I mean, of course, in my limited opinion, I think News9 Plus has done that great documentary on the quality action team, the quick action team, the Valley QAT that has been stationed. It trains different. It works different. It's got different paraphernalia. Why not that become a blueprint for the entire valley? Why not give the same kind of equipment and weaponry to other people? I mean, with the right kind of Kevlar on your chest, you'd be more comfortable in moving out.
Here, if we look at what happened to Rifleman Javaid or what happened to Rifleman Aurangzeb, they were not in a combat situation,
Right.
They were in their civilian duties, basically. They were on civil this thing, and you don't expect that. So,
but when is a soldier never on duty? And of course, there are very, emotional connotations to all of this as well. What I'm saying is, have you heard from the ruling dispensation there till now?
Till now, I think they are not going to make any kind of
statement. Is there any
statement
particular
right
kind of
now
statement that has come out?
No.
You need to be putting these kind of statements in the public so that the public gets to know that the government is doing something for them.
See, as far as the ruling dispensation, or because we know that it's the governor who as of now rules it, the response, it's better kept off the political hooks as of now, because if one statement comes in, I'm sure there will be more counter statements also coming in, and then more names would go. But what we are discussing right now, the issue at hand, is the undying trend of army personnel being targeted. Now, Varghese, obviously, as we discussed, that these heinous acts have not paid any dividend to these terrorists for sure, but a young life at times is lost, a young budding career is also snuffed out of life. In your opinion, obviously, has the government been able to, let alone the societal beliefs, to ward off the terror challenges that we had in the past till now in Kashmir?
If you look at Kashmir right now, I mean, it's a far cry from the kind of militancy that you saw in the 1990s, the 91s, when the Azadi cries were going on. It is a far cry from that. Because...
Or from the recent, history of stone pelting.
I mean, stone pelting, yeah. When
the Yasin Malik sort of an era.
That is all gone in the
we are away from that.
We are away from all that.
So there is no denying that.
The fact remains is that we have not been able to stem it out completely, but the fact remains is that we have brought it under extreme control. So that is the problem for some of those people sitting out across the border. and those terrorist organizations that have been funneling money in the name of Kashmir from those paymasters across the border, and those paymasters funneling money from some other organization saying that they will foster trouble over here. So it's about a money connection that we should also be looking at. So now what has happened is the tap of youth who are ready to take up those guns and carry on the so-called causes, it's drying up. The youth are not coming. They're not getting recruits the way they want to get. And with the abrogation, with more integration of the Kashmir Valley and the Jammu and Kashmir towards India, rather than from being that isolated state, and with more money pouring in terms of investment, and as we said, G20 happening. The perception is also changing that there is life outside the gun. So narrative is also changing. I was interested because in Jammu and Kashmir, one person.
So wait a minute. For the benefit of the viewers, how does this help these terrorists that are trying to recruit these youngsters, trying to brainwash them, उनको अपनी तरीके से जिस तरीके से वो ट्रेन करना चाहते हैं? How does this help them abducting a young 25-year-old Muslim?
See, that's what I'm saying. Look at his profile. The profile is the problem for them. What is the profile? He's a youngster. He's with the Indian Armed Forces. He's holding the tricolor. He's becoming an inspiration for his people in the village.
And the youngsters are looking up to it.
Youngsters are looking up to it, and they are also seeing it as a way of employment, a stable kind of employment as well. So all those factors is the problem.
And there is a proxy, support also coming in now. Earlier we used to see that there were methods of, online approach being done. There were videos that were circulated. There were open clarion calls being made for the youth to come and join these extremist and terrorist forces. Now, a growing trend, especially in the Jammu and Kashmir area and Punjab, is that of use of the drones to supply drugs, and especially in Jammu and Kashmir, guns, weapons, and FICN. Fake Indian currency notes. So that also in a way is pushing this agenda. So, a Javaid, for that matter, or an Aurangzeb, obviously time and again they try to set it as an example, but obviously they are not succeeding in it. But this tacit support, this funneling of money, weapon, drugs, that is also something needs to be put under check.
Well, those factors are something that the armed forces have been keeping a tab on, especially when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. You're talking about Jammu and Kashmir post abrogation. It is also a place where there is a lot of outreach programs that have been carried out at several levels. There has been an attempt to get the pundits back. They're trying to bring the composite culture of Kashmir back. They're giving more of an identity, or what I read or understood from Kashmiri is that to have your Kashmiriyat back, to have that self-identity in you, but at the same time being integrated with the rest of the country. Previously I was saying why it's become a problem. Why it's become a problem? It's because you have people understanding economics in Jammu and Kashmir really well. There was a person who said, where on earth will I get 1 billion ready-made tourists for my business in Kashmir? So if there is peace, you're looking at that kind of this thing. So they do understand that at the end of the and see, if there was a time when people were talking about Azadi, there was a time when people were talking about integration with Pakistan. But what is Pakistan today? Pakistan is one of the most unstable nuclear weapon state in the world. You don't want a failed state. You don't want to be a part of it.
If it really is a state.
Yeah, if it qualified as state. So you don't want to keep your destiny tied with it. Then you talked about being free. But how free can you be when you have Pakistan on one side, China on the other side, and India over there, all surrounded by giants?
There's also the question of the area. Another pattern that one can look at, Pankaj, is of course the 4 things that we loudly spoke about here. The age, the designation that they're all riflemen in terms of the objectives that they carry out, the religion, the community they hail from, and of course the regiment. But another thing is the area, Kulgam area, where these kind of abductions have happened in the past as well.
Frontline areas, obviously.
If the government knows, and if the security personnel themselves know, and it's again easy for us to be sitting here in the studio talking about how security should be carried out there in the near the front lines. If they know this kind of abduction pattern exists in this area, why not have more surveillance there? आज की डेट में टेक्निक और टेक्नोलॉजी की कोई भी कमी नहीं है.
देखिए कबीर, सर्वेलेंस जहाँ तक सवाल है, it is fine, but if it infringes upon the general public life, Kashmir, there is a very thin line also.
But you be smart about it.
We have to see, technology comes in handy for sure, but it is also ensured that it doesn't hinder with the lives of the people.
Remember the
also.
recent attack that took place on that the anti-terrorist squad truck?
The firing that had happened.
They came from amid the mist. There was proper guerrilla warfare. It was covered from three sides. There was proper firing, and then the fuel tank burst.
Right. No, you're right. See, I mean, if they are planning, then obviously counter planning and defensive planning or offensive planning should be there in the base. But here we are talking about a 25-year-old guy who was back at home for Eid, mingling with his family, and then happily bidding them goodbye just a day before when he was abducted. If you look at the pattern, the way he takes his car, goes to a nearby market, then the car is found abandoned at some other place in Paranhall, whereas he lives in Achatal area. So all these things, obviously, whether he was lured or those factors, I'm sure the forces are looking into.
Right.
But if at all the trap was laid, it must have been a trap, following him right from the way he exited.
Must have been sophisticated. I mean, they had it right down to the T. That's how they carry out these kind of crimes, heinous crimes. 9 kilometers in the hilly areas is a lot of distance. So if his car was found 9 kilometers away from his actual place of and point of origin residence, that means he either went there himself or he was lured, and which is that it quite possibly is a factor at play as well. And of course, we don't want to spread any kind of misinformation amongst the public when we're also talking out loud here, trying to think out the possibilities, because it's been so many hours, and I know it is sensitive, and the army will of course tread very carefully in terms of putting the right kind of information out in the public domain. सबको सब कुछ नहीं बताना है. It's a matter of security and national security.
Security और panic भी create नहीं करना है. ये बहुत
But for how long, Pankaj? How long will we listen to those cries?
No, I mean, see, I was saying it's a far cry from what was happening in the 1989 to 91 to 93. Till then, the whole of Jammu and Kashmir was on a boil. Now, with the separation of Jammu and Kashmir, especially with the Ladakh being taken into a union territory, I mean, the concentration is on the populated part of that region. So it is, if you're talking about militancy, it's dying a natural death. And these are desperate attempts that are being carried out to, flog it and make it, get it onto the streets again. And first, they need to get rid of people who owe their allegiance to the Indian national flag.
With militancy comes a lot of terror as well.
I mean, see, when we say militancy, it is nothing but actually terrorism.
Precisely.
So it's just pure terrorism.
I come from the opinion that they're all terrorists.
They are all terrorists.
You're trying to create that atmosphere of terror, which people and the government and the public, you have to give credit where it's due. The public, the people who have actually suffered this, all communities.
And now they have rejected
the Shiv Sena Dogra community. I'm taking a look at Twitter. Beg your pardon, on X. Sounds horrible. I don't know why. So I was taking a look at the microblogging website, and it says that the Shiv Sena Dogra is out there protesting. Everybody, you're talking about we shouldn't be politicizing this. People on the ground have already begun.
See, invariably it will be. But then, again, our course of discussion and our idea behind choosing this topic obviously is
let's not forget there is an election lens, sort of a potential election lens on Jammu and Kashmir. The delimitation, all that is already being looked at. But again, you're right. I mean, let's not digress. These factors, however, are at play.
Kabir, Varghese, thank you so much for speaking to us. You know what? We will revisit this by this evening again, or the moment we have concrete information on the whereabouts.
We must have some sort of concrete information. Yes, because I would personally want one of the government agencies to come out and at least say one word, at least speak to the...
I'm sure the army would be rather taking this call of addressing, and as far as the media communique is concerned, they are in touch with the local police also, and very soon we should be expecting. But this is what we had for you. Javaid, the 25-year-old rifleman from Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry, has been abducted as of now, and a search operation is in full swing. We'll keep a close eye and bring you the latest as and when it trickles in. Thanks for watching.
Adani, one of the richest men in the world, or a business honcho, accused of manipulating the market.
अदानी जी 609 नंबर से दूसरे नंबर तक कैसे पहुंचे? सिर्फ एक सवाल पूछा, नरेंद्र मोदी जी आपका अदानी जी से रिश्ता क्या है?
He has given the space, the railways, the airport, which he has no experience also. So the country's interest has been compromised.
Government has been very clearly supporting few industrial groups, including Adani's industrial group.
Target Adani. Streaming now.
June 23rd, 1757, Siraj-ud-Daulah, the last independent Nawab of Bengal, was killed by Robert Clive in a decisive battle. This ended his reign and marked the turning point that started East India Company's dominance over Bengal and slowly over the entire Indian subcontinent.
When Clive arrives in Murshidabad after the victory of Plassey, after the defeat and the death of Siraj-ud-Daulah, he just puts it in his pocket. I think 24 boats are loaded with the treasure of the Murshidabad treasury and punted down the river to Fort William, Calcutta.
The entire Indian subcontinent was completely looted, completely plundered by the greedy servants of East India Company.
In the 2 centuries that followed, India, ancient civilization and one of the richest nations in the world, would be left impoverished. Its heritage and legacies mutilated and spoiled, its treasures and heirlooms looted. It would all begin with the plunder of Bengal.
This is the story of the conspiracy and greed of East India Company and the company admiral Robert Clive. This is also the story of 23-year-old Siraj-ud-Daulah, the treachery of Mir Jafar and Jagat Seth. It is set in the Bengal of 1750s. The story moves between Calcutta on the banks of Hooghly River that had already become the power center of British merchants, and Murshidabad, the capital city of the Nawab of Bengal, on the banks of the Bhagirathi River.
It was a Bengal which cannot even be thought of today. If we look back, we would find that it is the entirety of West Bengal and our neighboring country Bangladesh. This was the core Bengal, the Bengal presidency, encircled with entire of Bihar, entire of Jharkhand, entire of Odisha, and southwest part of Assam and entire of Tripura.
In the 18th century, Bengal was everything. It had 1 million looms. It was the centre of the textile trade, and the textiles trade was particularly in Gujarat for cottons and for silks, cottons, and for embroideries and painted textiles, Bengal.
The new capital of Murshidabad in West Bengal was a complete new town. It's a beautiful new town. And Jahangir established a new town adjoining Dhaka called Jahangirnagar, which is still there. These two very prosperous cities, along with Patna, are the 3 power centers that controlled the Nawabi of Bengal. So, Bengal was almost an independent province. At the very beginning of the 17th century, the Queen, Victoria I, issued a blanket permission to a consortium of the British merchants to do trading across all the ports of Indian Ocean. So this consortium of the British merchants called East India Company, they made their establishments in the southern peninsula of India, and they gradually pointed out Bengal as their favorite zone. Why? Because the Strait of Ganges that meets the estuary here was a very navigable river.
You know, what today Twitter or Facebook or Google or ExxonMobil, any of the big oil companies are, or Microsoft, Apple. This is what the East India Company is by 1800. And it extracts wealth from India and it enriches Britain. Britain suddenly now is the premier economy of Europe. Partly this is the slave trade and the Caribbean plantations, which are producing huge wealth by the 18th century, but partly it's the looting and the asset stripping and the trade of India.
The British East India Company was increasing their influence in the Indian subcontinent, particularly in Bengal since 1634. By the 1750s, the East India Company, which had its own army, had started recruiting locals as soldiers or sepoys in their army on a large scale. So in 1756, when the new Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Daulah, attacked and captured Calcutta to stop the British from fortifying the city, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Clive was sent from Madras to deal with this situation. Robert Clive, with British and Indian sepoys, retook Calcutta on January 2nd, 1757 and forced Siraj-ud-Daulah to restore the company's privileges, pay compensation and allow the British to fortify Calcutta.
The army of East India Company always had very few British and mostly Indians. But the Indians didn't have any scope for improvement or promotion. They were kept at the lower level. But the highest level were either ruled by some fortune seeker like Robert Clive or some aristocrat who were proficient in dealing with royal agreements, conspiracies and legal deeds.
Clive is a young East India Company officer, hates being an accountant, which is his first incarnation. He twice tries to shoot himself as a young man. He's so bored and miserable in Madras. But he finds a great capacity for warfare. He's an accountant who unexpectedly finds himself in the position of a soldier. 18th century warfare is often very formalized. Two armies meet in the middle of the day, they face each other, they exchange fire, and one of them eventually runs away. But Clive doesn't do that. He attacks in the early morning, in the fog. He attacks at night. He attacks in thunderstorms. He always attacks from the rear when people are not expecting it. And he manages to frighten his opponents. And so he's a very successful strategist. He's a ruthless man. He's not at all a civilized ruler. He's just interested in enriching himself. And he does that very successfully.
When the power of the Mughal Empire declined, the Nawab of Bengal in Murshidabad became financially independent with the help of bankers such as Jagat Seth. Alivardi Khan, who started off as a general to the Nawab of Bengal, in 1740 toppled the last Nasiri dynasty Nawab, Sarfraz Khan, and assumed power himself. Now, Alivardi Khan had no sons, so when his youngest daughter gave birth to his first grandchild, a son named Siraj-ud-Daulah, he adopted him and named him his heir. At 5 a.m. on the 9th of April 1756, 80-year-old Alivardi Khan died. The 23-year-old Siraj-ud-Daulah was declared the new Nawab, but his accession to the throne was disliked, rejected and debated by most of his relatives, his aunts, his cousin brothers, and Alivardi's sister's husband Mir Jafar. This dislike for Siraj-ud-Daulah is what Robert Clive used to hatch a plan that they would implement in June of 1757.
So, Siraj in 1756, when he became the Nawab, he possibly didn't know that what an inferno he is going to ride upon. There was a huge historical character called Jagat Seth. What is governor of Reserve Bank today? That was Jagat Seth in the court of Murshidabad.
What you tend not to read in either British or Indian textbooks is the fact that Clive's victory at Plassey was not the result of some brilliant military strategy. It's a deal with the Jagat Seths. The Jagat Seths are not only paying Clive to attack Siraj-ud-Daulah, they're also paying Mir Jafar, who is Siraj-ud-Daulah's general, to walk off the battle in the middle. So what is often portrayed as a devious British move in Indian textbooks or a heroic British victory in British textbooks, in fact, is a simple story of Jagat Seth's treachery.
The Battle of Plassey is called one of the pivotal battles in the control of Indian subcontinent by the colonial powers. Siraj-ud-Daulah had a vastly superior force, and it seemed that British victory was impossible. The two armies met at Plassey near Murshidabad by the Bhagirathi River.
On the rainy afternoon of 23rd June 1757, when the battle ensued, Zafar did not jump on them as a crouching tiger, and he was immediately caught by the soldiers of Mir Zafar. Zafar put a waistband, took him. He was immediately killed by Mir Miran, Mir Zafar's eldest son. Just after the battle and after the demise of Siraj-ud-Daulah, Clive entered the palace. Mir Zafar handed over the key to him and said, "Take away whatever you like."
And when Clive arrives in Murshidabad after the victory of Plassey, after the defeat and the death of Siraj-ud-Daulah, he just puts it in his pockets. He's paid, first of all, by the Jugget sets, £240,000, which in 18th century standards you can multiply by about 18. It's multi-million money in modern terms. It makes him, in one day, the richest self-made man in Europe.
Ships after ships, boats after boats, filled with what not? Gold, ornaments, coins, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, jade stone utensils, mahogany furnitures, gold palanquin, silver palanquin, the howdah atop an elephant. Everything was looted personally by Robert Clive. No one has a complete list that what Clive took to England, but definitely most of the exhibits that make the Britishers proud nowadays are nothing but Indian treasures that they looted.
On top of that, the East India Company has paid £1 million for their share. And I think 24 boats are loaded with the treasure of the Murshidabad treasury and punted down the river to Fort William, Calcutta. And by the time that the company seizes Bengal, by the end of the 1750s, they have control of what is, in a sense, the biggest cash cow in India. And they're able to milk it.
I would say British royalty, British Parliament actually sheltered Robert Clive. They did not inquire much because they knew that 300 years back, war scruples were different. They knew that Clive kept a share for himself. He did not deposit everything to the royal treasury. So when Clive was questioned in the British Parliament, he expressed a surprise. Feigning a surprise, he said, "Don't you think that whatever I deposited with the royalty is more than what is expected?" He was such a shameless invader.
Clive was made the first Baron of Plassey, a title chosen by him. The treasures of India that were taken away by him are now in United Kingdom. Siraj-ud-Daulah's abandoned palanquin remains with Clive's descendants in the Clive Museum in Powys Castle. In 2004, the jade flask decorated with emeralds and rubies was bought by a Qatari royal from Clive's descendant for £3 million. It is now in the Islamic Museum in Doha. American historian Brooke Adams has recorded that the Bengal plunder from the Nawab's treasury was so excessive that it fueled Britain's Industrial Revolution from 1760.
When you go to Powys Castle today, a private house in the middle of the Welsh countryside, still in the hands of the original owners, though managed by the National Trust, there are galleries of what can only be described as loot on display. Some of it is from Siraj-ud-Daulah's capital, Murshidabad. Some of it is from Tipu's capital.
The Battle of Plassey was the turning point for the East India Company, and the defeat and death of Siraj-ud-Daulah marked the start of the rule of the East India Company